What's happening, listeners? Lovely to see you all again. This is the latest episode of the UX Coach podcast, and I'm your host, Andy Parker. In this episode, I'm in conversation with Johnny Burch, founder of Progression App, a new product to help design managers and team leaders that aims to stop spreadsheet wrangling, text-wordsmithing, and ladder shuffling when it comes to supporting team growth. Johnny's experiences as a design manager at Deliveroo, one of the world's fastest growing startups in the gig economy, gave him insight into the murky world of team management and career development that resulted in Progression, which is now in alpha. We discuss how better tools for design leadership and management may be able to address and improve the current inequalities and balances in the design industry, and his long-term dreams for how Progression could contribute to better identifying and remedying this problem. We dig into the definition of an individual contributor, the transition to being a manager, and adjusting from maker mode to a calendar full of half-hour one-to-ones. We met up with Johnny, finding a rare hour in his day as he announced finding a partner to join him on the Progression journey. So here we go. Okay, so Johnny, thank you very much for taking part in the UX Coach podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
Let's start off with a bit of your background. So tell us about what you're doing now.
Right now, day to day, I'm sitting and either writing code, which is not something I expected myself to say this time last year. But broadly, I'm building software to help design teams to grow sustainably. So what that really means is there's this, maybe we'll get into this, but there's this spreadsheet that everyone tends to create when they're building their design team, or any team, quite often in tech. I've seen these outside the world of design, but the spreadsheet looks a little bit like all the different roles and positions and seniority levels along the top of the spreadsheet. And then down the side, all the different skills that you can think of that someone might need to have as part of that role. So for a designer, you're going to have, visual design and the component parts of UX. People name them in completely different ways. So, and have different mental models applied to that. But broadly, you've got the same set of skills. And then soft skills as well. So how good a communicator are you, and how empathetic are you, and how much initiative are you showing at work, and how much are you a self-starter versus needing constant support, and all that kind of stuff that kind of sits outside the core skills of what you consider to be a designer. Anyway, that spreadsheet, I created one in my last role. I was at Deliveroo and building the consumer and growth design teams there. And this spreadsheet, myself and the other people who are kind of working on this spreadsheet, the leadership team there, it took us months to get it out. And it was really painful to write. And then we kind of rolled out this thing with the goal to help everyone in the team understand how to grow. And it was a spreadsheet, and no one likes looking at a spreadsheet. And it's kind of this depressing experience scrolling around something that has been very much created according to your manager's mental model, and trying to understand how you fit into it. You can't necessarily see yourself, it's read-only. So anyway, it was a kind of a frustrating, necessary experience to go through building that. Very important for the team, but didn't feel like a satisfying experience. So then just over a year ago, I left Deliveroo to start actually a different company with two co-founders. And about 3 months into that, I decided to go off on my own, and ended up with a blank sheet of paper and went back to this spreadsheet. I think there's a maxim somewhere, I can't remember which book it's in, some business book, that says, if you see a spreadsheet, then that's an opportunity for a company. So I started looking for other spreadsheets, and I had ended up with a meta spreadsheet of spreadsheets, all the open source progression frameworks that I could find, written by people like BuzzFeed and Medium and some of the kind of big tech companies. And they all looked very similar to the one that we created. And I was being shared kind of private ones as well from other teams, all looked the same. And everyone, to an extent was frustrated by this process of having to build it, but also wanted their own team and culture represented within it as well. So it had to be this kind of mashup of broadly acceptable industry lingo with the mildly cheesy company values that they decided to put in next to it. And I just thought, well, there's an opportunity there to build something better for everyone. So that's kind of what I've spent the last 6 months, closer to 9 months doing.
So you're in private beta at the moment, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm calling it an alpha. I feel like you get a few. So I had a pilot, now I'm on an alpha. My beta is the third roll of the dice before I then launch, and it has to be kind of broadly right. So you get a few shots at this.
Nice.
But yes, I'm in alpha with, I think I've got 7 or 8 teams using it at the moment. And I put a waitlist page out kind of towards the end of last year, and I think there's 800-ish people on there. So I've got kind of obviously not all of those are going to turn into people that use the product, but I've got a good little group who it feels like they feel enough affinity with the thing that I'm trying to solve that they will be interested in trying it. And that's enough for me to understand how to solve this problem. Because I think the big thing that I've realized is, well, 2 things. One, if you're trying to replace a spreadsheet with something that people are going to have to pay for, it can't just be a little bit better than the spreadsheet. It has to be 10 times better than the spreadsheet. And spreadsheets are ultimately flexible, so you can do whatever you want with them and move things around. And actually recreating and improving on that experience in some ways is very hard. In other ways, I can superpower it with pre-written content and workflows and logins and all that kind of stuff. But in other ways, in terms of actually manipulating the content and making it fit exactly what the person has in their head, there's a huge amount of work to do to even just build enough to get to the point where it does the same thing as a spreadsheet. That's been an interesting learning. And for sure, when you start building anything, or at least this is true for me, the hubris of, how hard can it be? Very quickly turns into, okay, this problem is quite complicated. And every other person will disagree with your kind of opinion on how it should be built, and that's okay. And not everyone needs to be your customer and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah, right. So I'm interested to know about your background and how that has sort of ended up influencing this. Because when you were at Deliveroo, was your title design manager?
I was when I was there, design lead. But yeah, effectively, I was a design manager. Yeah.
What does that entail then? What makes that difference to being a design practitioner?
Yeah, so I went through over the last couple of jobs that I had, I went through this process of turning from an IC, an individual contributor, which is a very American term, but that's generally kind of common parlance for a creator or someone who is pushing the pixels or whatever the equivalent is. Moving into management, which is more focused on people. And it was a hard transition. It was, as a manager, you are fully focused on the output of other people and their happiness and everything that goes into, you're kind of feeding the machine rather than being the machine, if you like. What that means practically is you're sitting in a lot of meetings. You're trying to spend as much of your time as possible working out where the machine is breaking and what bit's going to fall off next, and trying to head that off at the pass. So constantly, especially if a team's growing very fast, which it was at Deliveroo, process constantly fails. With every 2 new people that join a team, you have to change every part of the process to fit them in. And there's constantly, and this is where the spreadsheet comes in. You're constantly thinking about how you can help people to grow, not only to get the most out of them for the company, but also to keep them happy so that they stick around, because hiring is really painful. And hiring is also one of your jobs. So you got to spend a bunch of your time designing a hiring process, potentially sourcing, depending on the kind of size of your company and what else they have going on. And then taking people through that process, ensuring that you're hiring good quality people, and then supporting them out the back of that so that they're successful at work. None of this is as well. You're managing up, so you're going to be talking to your peers in product and engineering, or it depends what the type of company is, but peers, but also your kind of seniors and potentially executives and senior stakeholders, or if you're working on a project with a marketing team, whoever the head of marketing is, and making sure that they're all happy with the progress of the work and the quality of the output. So all of that is frankly spinning plates. There is kind of some perverse satisfaction, not even perverse. There is satisfaction in it for sure, but you measure your output in terms of the output of your team. So your output is their cumulative output, and you have to find ways to take satisfaction from that because you're not shipping the work yourself. But also the timelines dramatically change. So, as an IC, I could put my headphones on and crank out some UI, and by the end of the day, there'd be something pretty slick, and it might even move, and I could show it to some people, and I get some dopamine-inducing reactions, around the quality of the interaction or whatever the thing is. Whereas, you're in a much grayer, more nebulous area as a manager. So you'll decide to do something, change a process, or introduce something new, a new way of doing things, or new people to the team, or move some people around, and you won't really see the benefit from that for weeks or months, if at all, because it's impossible to know whether the thing you did was better than. There's no counterfactual to compare against. So all of that, it requires a shift in mentality, and some people really love it, and some people who are possibly not actually fantastic ICs or doers become fantastic managers because it just better suits their way of thinking. And they can be incredibly empathetic and able to unpick human problems and these kind of real world situations, but aren't necessarily so interested in kind of the perfect user experience or the perfect UI.
So how did you end up taking up those kind of roles? Was there some kind of motivation to be more connected with supporting other people doing work? Had you sort of reached a point of burnout of being a doer?
No, it was, and I suspect that this is very common. It was born out of, in large part, that was what the company needed at the time. When I joined Deliveroo, to take that example, we were 150 people in the company total, and when I left, we were 2,000, and I was the first designer to join who was kind of at the seniority level to manage, and I joined a team. Simon, the head of design, who's still head of design, was managing 17 people on his own, and it was just the pressure valve that had to I had to jump in, and I was willing to as well. I joined in order to do that. It wasn't like I was told I was going to be a designer and then suddenly had to be a manager. This happened on day one, but that was what the company needed. And so yeah, to an extent, I was kind of given a bit of a baptism of fire because we were immediately hiring for many, many designers and building a research team and going into kind of moving from what was, when I joined, probably 2 product teams to many, many product groups with product teams within them and all that kind of stuff. So there were a lot of moving parts, and another designer to add as a direct report of Simon would have been a lot on him. And actually there was more impact I could have by being a manager. And frankly, I wanted to see what it was like. I wanted the challenge of trying to build a design team at one of the fastest growing companies that has ever existed in Europe. It felt like a compelling thing to try and do. So
a good challenge, yeah. I was watching Charlotte Clancy at the UXPA UK event not that long ago, talking about doing the same thing within the user research team and the challenges that she's faced, and that concept of building a framework, which I think is really interesting, and making smart decisions on who to hire and when, sounds like an entirely different design challenge that most of us just would not be ready for.
Well, you know what, you're put into... I think that to go back to skills, and I spend a lot of my time now thinking about how to frame hard to measure skills, and I think a lot of what goes into being able to handle that particular situation, which was everything's on fire, and the expectations of the company on our ability to hire were very high, and we'd never done it before collectively as a team. And a lot of that is just initiative, being comfortable making decisions fast, and being comfortable with changing processes quickly if they're not working, and being super aware of what was going on around you. And a lot of that, sure, if you came in with a bunch of management jobs under your belt already, you'd be able to draw on that experience. But a lot of it was also just cling on and don't let a bad day stop progress and all that kind of stuff, which is much more core to just the human condition rather than any kind of qualification that you may or may not have earned by being a designer for long enough, for example.
Well, that's something that you mentioned previously. You said that there was this point in time and you thought, I've got enough experience to be able to take this on and help this colleague of mine out. So for you, what was that experience? What was the definition there that you had of this experience that made you feel like this was a good next move? What had you been doing up to that point?
So at the company I was in previously, I was technically leading the design team as well. Unfortunately, we failed to really hire any designers that stuck. So it had been a bit of a management experience on paper, but never really in reality. So it was a company at a different life stage that was not necessarily, I mean, very few companies you can compare to a company like Deliveroo in terms of at that stage in its growth. So, but I think quite honestly, and I think that this is in many ways one of the big challenges of the design industry, and in terms of how nebulous it is, and how many, and this is exactly the what you talk about on your podcast, right? Is anyone can be anything. You can give yourself any title and decide that you're qualified for anything at any point in time, and someone will probably believe you because it's unclear what anything means anyway. Like you could call yourself a UX designer or a UI designer or a product designer or a visual designer or a graphic designer or et cetera, et cetera. Just bolt them on the end of your title, and then you are that effectively. I mean, there's very little to stop you doing that. So I think a lot of new managers, and it was me included, are up for the challenge, and they find a company that needs a manager, and then there's a certain amount of just self-belief that goes into it. I mean, I don't think I had hard evidence that I was going to be a good manager at all. And frankly, anyone that has not been one and thinks they have hard evidence that they'll be one is probably in for a bit of a shock, because it's different to how you expect it is going to be.
I've certainly spoken to a lot of people that have said they've had a real challenge with positions where they're a manager, but they're also expected to be an individual contributor at the same time, and having to be a practitioner and actually do some of the work as well as supporting others in doing it is just a break point that they can't handle. Have you had any of those kind of experiences?
Yeah, I was designing for the first year at Deliveroo while I had up to about 4 direct reports, and then after that it became very clear that whenever I was given, or whenever I would take on any responsibility in terms of the actual work itself, I would start letting people down.
Right.
So I worked very closely with the head of product for consumer, and she used to kind of give me shit work, like, whenever there was something that just needed doing. But it just started. So I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, but there you go. after a few months of that, then this kind of 1 point ticket that was on my plate had still not been done after 2 weeks, and I'd just be completely overwhelmed with the other stuff going on, and we just decided together that, well, I think I decided that I was just not going to do any work anymore. So I started rejecting Jira tickets and like deleting myself from all of the ones that already existed. And then she was like, okay, that's fine. I think context switching between maker mode, which is, what you need to be able to disappear for 4 hours to get anything done meaningfully as a designer a lot of the time, and manager mode, where you really are in half-hour increments across your day, is very hard to do. And the only way that I found I was able to manage it was by compartmentalizing whole days. So trying to fit all one-to-ones into one day, and any kind of heavy lifting managementy stuff into one day, and then potentially work a day from home if I had to crank out some work. Or and there is still kind of doing work within being a manager, and there'll be times when you just need to sit down and get some stuff done. But yeah, having to, and there's also an interesting, it sets up an interesting relationship in terms of if you are working alongside people who report to you, then sometimes it's harder to have conversations about quality of work, or, you're sitting in a crit and you're showing them your work and they're showing you their work, and then you have to have conversations about quality alongside that. Then it's actually, it can be harder to separate the two conversations.
I suppose you're having that difficulty of you're meant to be the authority on the subject matter at that point in time, right? So to then, there might be some organizations where there's a slight comfort of like saying to your boss, like, I think what you've done there is batshit crazy, and maybe we shouldn't go with that.
I definitely think that there is an opportunity for that to happen. I was always very cognizant of trying to be one of the team. I actually think I went too far the other way. I think I wasn't able enough to be authoritative when I needed to be, because I wanted to give that space for people to critique my work, for example, which then meant it was too hard for me to have a conversation where I was trying to impose some form of, but I mean, I very much believe in kind of servant leadership, and by being the manager, you aren't the authority per se. I mean, you're the guardian of the quality of the work, for sure, and it is on you. And that is, if you're to write down the expectations on different people of their roles, then that is within your remit. But definitely, I wouldn't expect. And frankly, there were many people on my team who were far better than me at almost everything, every component part of being a designer. But what I knew was a bit more about the context of the business and a bit more about the world that we were operating in, so I could help kind of guide things in the right direction. But seeing a team as a group of people who are equally important to the team, rather than, I suppose, a leader and the minions, I'm not sure, is really important for the quality of the work, but also the everyone's happiness and desire to still be a part of it. Giving people the feeling of autonomy, and that they can really run with things and not feel like they're going to be seagulled on, is hugely important, I think.
There's nothing worse than the swoop and poop manager.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about how you've been developing progression and how that sort of matches into your own experiences and the experiences of people that you've been talking to, in respect of what does a design career look like today for someone that's working in digital products and services?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm really just at the very start of mapping what that currently looks like. And in many ways, I don't think I'm in a position to be able to answer that yet. One of my kind of fundamental, I mean, it's not really a belief because it's true, but even the most experienced design manager in the entire world, you name the person who has led the most teams, seen the most teams, it's still probably a dozen teams. And I think that there's a real opportunity to aggregate a huge amount of that data together and then use that to guide more deeply how teams grow. And there are companies like Envision that are obviously doing these big surveys to work out what a design career looks like and what a healthy design team looks like and what a healthy design team within an organization looks like, and how much power it has within the organization, etc., how design-led a company is. But with 7 or 8 teams, I mean, I've spoken to a lot more, but with 7 or 8 teams now actively putting data into my product, it's going to be another 100 teams, I think, before I can really start to say, well, this is what at a small company a definitive design career might start to look like, and this is what a medium size and et cetera. But frankly it's a function of team size, design team size, company size, whether they are a startup and really going for growth and headcount is going up, doubling every year, versus it's a more steadily growing company, maybe an older company. It's also a function of the roots of the company. So if you talk to a corporate or a financial institution that's been around for hundreds of years, they're going to have a slightly different culture to a company that was born last year, raised 15 million quid and now has to hire 30 people by yesterday. They're going to have different and the people that are running the team probably have a little bit less experience and are flying by the seat of their pants somewhat as well. It's a function also of the number of reports per manager as well. So if you have a head of design who has a team of 20, they are all their responsibility. They haven't worked out how to delegate to more managers within the team yet. Then they are going to be so time poor that they just want shortcuts and they just want to get there as quickly as possible. Whereas a company that has a design team where there is already multiple management layers and there are people whose only role is to think about the quality of the team over the next 10, 20, 30 years and to put in absolute best-in-class thought leadership around the quality of the careers and the quality of the work, then they're going to have a different attitude and come with a lot of knowledge themselves that they want to bring in. And we'll say to an extent, this is part of our employer brand to do something different to the norm. Whereas, I mean, I've watched plenty of teams just say, what do you recommend? And they'll have the leaders will have lots of opinions about what is right, but then as soon as you offer them a UI with some shortcuts and some templates, then they're all over it. So, and I think that for me that's very exciting because to an extent, sure, you're kind of handing responsibility over to a tool rather than making that decision yourself as a leader, but also it's important for all of us that we start to wrap a little bit more common language around all of this stuff. And if I'm a senior designer at company X and I want to go to company Y, I will also be a senior designer, or my equivalent role will be this. And if the titles are different and the salary is different and the company size is different, all the rest is different, I can at least draw some connective tissue between what I've been doing right now and what I will be doing there. And the things that I know I'm good at here, I will also be able to work on there.
So it's like the tasks and the roles is a little bit more related to that than necessarily the overarching category label that goes with it, right?
Yeah, and people get caught up on titles just constantly. I mean, there's Jason Massoud who does a lot of thinking around design careers. He put together this spreadsheet where he listed a bunch of design titles or design skills and titles, and then just, I think, opened it up to the internet. And I think he's got hundreds of combinations of different titles and skill sets, and there's any number of things that you can be, and that just causes a huge amount of confusion, and it allows the shysters and the cowboys to jump in and claim they're lots of things they're not. One of the things that I'm really excited about, and I'm very aware that I say this as a coming from a place of privilege and as a white man, but and undoubtedly I have benefited from this broken system so far in my career. But being able to do anything to help people who aren't necessarily so good at playing the game, but are very good at their jobs, to also be able to have a fair crack of the whip, and people from underrepresented backgrounds and unfortunately, women and people of color haven't had a fair crack of the whip so far. And I think that there's a real opportunity with a layer of data and with a layer of normalized skills that will allow anyone to be fairly represented. Then there's an opportunity to improve that over time. And that may be something that happens over generations rather than years. But so that's kind of one of the things that I get excited about.
It's really difficult to know how to get fair representation from anything at the moment. What about roles themselves? Have you noticed anything at all within your own experiences, perhaps, rather than necessarily with what you've been sort of gathering for insight into developing progression around the types of roles and whether there's some common patterns between things like gender disparity?
Quite honestly, I don't have the data set to be able to say. There are data sets out there. I don't have one yet, so I can only speak anecdotally. I think that there's disparity in terms of title between different types of company, and I think there is data in the world that shows that there is a leveling off of seniority, definitely in women around the time that they potentially become mothers. So there are interesting patterns there, and frustrating patterns, frankly. The number of people that graduate into the design industry versus the number of people that get to very senior positions within the design industry. The balance of gender is very different. Those two ends of the scale. For me, my world very much so far has been talking to individual leaders and trying to work out what their problems are that they most desperately want to solve right now. And every single one is slightly different. And I don't think any of them, in fact, I know that none of them, and this is also a self-selecting group, like they actively want to solve this problem on some level, so therefore they're going to be the ones thinking about it. But they are all top of mind thinking about fairness and diversity and bringing new, interesting opinions and attitudes into their teams. And we've talked about that, so it's kind of top of mind. But for every one of those, there's 10 more companies that aren't really don't have time to, or just don't want to think about this quite yet.
Let's talk about the career progression side of things, the actual types of roles that fit in it. Do you think that there are any roles which are currently missing within design teams?
So at Deliveroo, I think we were one of the first teams to, or at scale, to have three parts of our we called it the CRD, content research and design team. And maybe Charlotte talked about this as well, but having designers, researchers, and content writers as first-class citizens of your team is a pretty powerful idea. Possibly hard to sell to some people who will be making decisions about what your budget is for your team and how many hires you can make. But as soon as you start having those kind of component parts that all are responsible for certain things, then actually people will say, oh, well, designers can do research and designers can write the content. They're writing the words already, so just leave them doing it. But it's more, I think it becomes extra powerful when the designers don't have to worry about that as well. And they can actually have a good conversation about content, because then that helps designers to respect that part of the process a bit more. And especially with tools like Figma, which Deliveroo have written about how they use Figma for their design process, but you can start to have collaboration on a much wider level. So you can have researchers, content writers, and designers all writing into the same document and kind of coming up with the answer. And I think what we'll see is, and this is already happening with research for sure, but increasingly with content, we'll see teams hiring their first designer and then their first researcher and then their first content writer, or even the other way around. So that's kind of exciting. And I think not enough companies are thinking about it in that way yet, structurally. I mean, there's also a big conversation about kind of design ops and people who come in to teams, and really you need a certain team size for this to be justified, because arguably a team of 3, you will do your own design ops. But someone who is subservient to the team and ensures that they have all the tools and everything they need to do a good job, but isn't doing that from the position of a manager. Traditionally, probably a manager is the one thinking about what tools should we be using, and how do we build our design system and make sure that we're all consistent, and how do we best support front-end development and the engineers that are building the UIs that we're designing, and all that kind of stuff. And how are we recruiting research participants? All of that is the hidden cost of doing a good job in a design team. So I think we'll start to see that design ops roles move higher up, or become a hire that happens sooner within the life cycle of a design team, in part because team members are already doing it and it's actually a waste of their time, because that's not what they've been trained to do.
So the issue is it's a task at the moment rather than a role.
Well, it's being treated as a task and being done badly as a result, whereas for someone who is really very good at it and enjoys it, then it's not a task. It adds a huge amount of value to a team done well, but it's harder to measure. You can't. Everything falls down next to beautiful UI, unfortunately, and this is the dribbleization of etc. Blah blah. If the senior stakeholders and the people that are our peers in engineering and product and people making hiring decisions, quite often will understand a designer's output still as a UI. So anything that isn't directly that, or people that can directly do that, it's harder to hire for them. But what I hope is that the support, the kind of back office side of design ops, but also these roles that are haven't traditionally been seen as hard requirements of the team, will start to be seen as hard requirements of a team.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it, how any other function within a business, particularly when it starts to scale, those questions don't come into play. You can have a HR team with like 20 people in it. They ultimately all do the same thing and it's quite invisible.
Yeah.
Same as with the accounting team. And we don't measure them with the same yardstick. This is, it's administrative tasks, and you can't measure that in the same ways. That's not to say that you can't measure impact, because I would say that the value versus effort argument is pretty strong with operations of any kind, right? If I've got someone else that's doing recruitment, that's just saved me half a day, maybe an entire day's work, which I can then pour into something else.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes sense, really.
Absolutely.
But I can also see how it's difficult to quantify that when you're looking at a budget sheet.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's the same bit of understandable human mentality that kind of wants to see quant over qual data. I'd much rather put 2 features out there and see which one wins than research them up front and then make one decision, because one of them is real data and the other one is just made up by someone. Like that's the harmful kind of attitude that leads to people not investing in something like research soon enough. But it's understandable as well, because one of them spits out a lovely graph or a pie chart, and the other one fundamentally is someone's opinion that you can still disagree with.
Yeah.
So yeah, working out how to prioritize unmeasurable things is the name of the game. I think that's what we're all in this for.
So I'm guessing that progression is going to be providing some kind of way of looking at how you develop key skills throughout your career. That seems like quite a long period of time.
Yeah.
So is there benefits in this being something that can be used by an individual rather than a team?
Yeah, so that's very much my plan. So the to put this in the context of me and my life and my, I suppose, current ambition, I'm trying not to raise any money. I've also been a part of enough VC-backed companies to see that, you have to make that decision very deliberately and not just assume that that's the thing that you have to do. But as a result of that, I can't start going straight to individual designers because people don't pay for anything, and it needs to be a viable business first. But also, if this doesn't work this needs to work for teams and individual designers. If designers are measuring themselves on something that no teams respect the value of, then it's going to be kind of meaningless anyway. So I have a bit of a chicken and egg, and I've decided to start with the chicken or the egg. I'm not sure. Start with one, which is making sure that I'm building something that has real utility for a design team. And that is things like, importantly, that is utility not just for the manager, but for the team members as well. So I can track my skills and my achievements over days rather than over weeks. So I don't end up getting to my 360 review or my quarterly review and can't remember what I did 3 months ago. I actually have something to hand that I can use. And that's great for managers and for individuals. But then what that obviously leads to is then, well, hold on. As soon as I leave this company, it's still disappeared and I've got to start again. And that's no good. I'm still not going to invest fully in something that will only last for as long as I'm here, because I might actually not like this job very much. Or I might know that in 2 years' time I want to go off and do that. So it kind of still undermines the process. And this sounds kind of counter to what a company would want, but it's my belief that companies that allow their team members to then take that record of work away with them will actually retain those people for longer. So the goal is to allow someone to graduate from college or start their design career wherever and however that starts, and start building that record of work, and then take that all the way through every job that they have. And that will help to inform and grow not just their seniority, but actually mainly their shape and their interests and what most drives them, and will allow them to see patterns in the work that they're doing, to see where there might be something that they would really enjoy that they haven't even tried yet, for example. Or to find a mentor who is the same shape as them, but maybe a year ahead, who can help to guide them in the right direction. And all of those things start to come into play. But they do start to come into play later with a network effect. And I need to build that network through providing utility to companies, basically.
So what in your mind is the definition of senior? What determines whether someone is a senior member of staff?
Well, yeah, good question. I mean, I actually don't. The tool stops short of making that decision too overtly. So the way that progression works is you have levels of ability within skills, and then there's kind of a cumulative level of ability that determines your overall seniority level, which means that you can be an excellent researcher and not so good at visual design, or you can be a fantastic visual designer and not do any research, and you'll be at the same seniority level. So that's the kind of the broad structure of the product. That said, to go back to the subject matter of your podcast, which is probably a useful thing to do, I think the way I think about seniority and the way I see a lot of people think about seniority, who I think are getting it right, is it's level of influence and impact on the organization at a whole. So as a junior person, you are taking on small tasks and you're completing them effectively, and you're able to learn and able to be autonomous and able to take the initiative and go and fix something if you see it's broken, and have that sense of ownership and responsibility over the size of work that you're doing. But you're not necessarily helping other team members, even within your immediate circle. You're kind of still in learning mode. When you turn into a mid-level person, then you're starting to say, well, hold on, not just my work, but the work of the team could improve in this way. And I'm going to go and take responsibility for that. And I'm going to go and talk to the people that I need to talk to make sure that that happens. And that could be the quality of a process, or it could be the quality of a piece of UI. But broadly, you're talking about something that has a wider scope and affects more people effectively, either customers or internal team members, or whatever the piece of work is that you're doing. It doesn't really matter so much as you're thinking a bit bigger and you're taking that step more ownership. And then when you get to a more senior level, yeah, I mean, this kind of just extrapolates out, but when you get to a more senior level, but still within being an IC, then you should be, there should be aspects of the team's work that you are actively leading. And that could be developing a new process for critique to make sure that you're getting what you need out of critique, and other people are as well. It could be taking on mentoring of junior people in the team and working out how to run an intern program, or it could be something that is much more within the work itself, or improving how the whole team synthesizes the research that the researchers are doing, or something like that. But you're taking on more ownership over the quality of the team's work rather than just your immediate peers' work or your own work. And then that keeps going up. So, there's now a lot of teams are hiring principal designers, which is a very, very senior IC level, who might be more senior than a lot of the managers on the team even. And at that point, then, I mean, you really have to be a thought leader. You have to be going out, writing a lot, helping with hiring, helping with bringing up the brand of the company as a not just as a business, but as a hiring company. And you need to be on conference stages, or you need to be, doesn't have to be, public speaking, but you need to be kind of elevating the quality of design at a business level. And a lot of companies don't even have any need for that kind of a person. Not many companies below a certain size would say, well, yeah, no, it makes sense that this principal person is sitting in a room on their own, coming up with the best design ever, or this new process, or this new way of thinking, a new paradigm, the equivalent of the bottom drawer or the pull to refresh, and inventing something new and getting out into the world and creating an open source project so that it gets wide adoption, because in 6 months' time or a year's time, that's going to mean that we're going to be able to talk about that. And by the way, that's 3 of their days a week. So they're not doing any other work during that time. Like, it takes a certain team size and philosophy to get to that. But you can stay as an IC as a designer without having to go into management, if that's what you want to do.
I think that's a big challenge for a lot of people. And I think having worked in an agency which was built on the premise of they effectively only hired your description of a principal designer, and it was all about really more how capable you are at marketing. Yeah, that's kind of what we're describing, isn't it? Is that concept of employer brand and everything else is something quite different to just being part of the manufacturing process, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I've always felt that there's a big mistake in a lot of organizations of that just because you've been doing something for a long period of time means that you have to by default move into managing a group of people, because it's such a different set of skills.
It is.
And it's not what everyone wants to do. There's people out there who did an apprenticeship in carpentry and they still build kitchens. Yeah. There is nothing wrong with that.
No.
But we seem to have created this like staged process where you have to elevate yourself to a certain stature, and the end game is director of brand or whatever, or that you are responsible for 20 teams, and that's not everyone's cup of tea.
And that's endemic, or that is a natural conclusion of the power balance of a manager IC relationship. So like that will always exist. There is no I doubt there's any company in the world that doesn't on some level encourage that type of behavior, or no industry in the world that doesn't encourage that type of behavior. If you're managing other people and you're responsible for lots of people other than yourself, then that is going to be seen as a position of power, and therefore kind of a measure of success. But I think that thinking about seniority in terms of level of impact is that's why it's really important. Is you can sit and keep working on features and smaller things for your entire career, and that is fine, and that shouldn't be frowned upon if that's what you love to do. If you want to become more senior, it doesn't have to be going into people management, but you will be expected to have more impact. And broadly, the only way to start having more impact is by communicating better, and exactly what you say, become the salesman and become the person that can change hearts and minds through some means or other, which affects more and bigger business objectives, and affects bigger change in the world. And so while you don't have to become a people manager, which is a very different job and something that people should go into mindfully and know that they can also leave management as well, importantly. But you have to be comfortable with the idea that you're going to have to put your neck on the line. You're going to have to go out and take on harder pieces of work, more nebulous pieces of work, things with a less clear outcome that you can't achieve nearly as quickly, that involve talking to people that don't have the same opinions as you and changing their minds. And all of that is still a requirement of a senior doer role as well, because that's the only way to have that big impact and have that big kind of sphere of influence, which is what people want to pay a six-figure salary for. And ultimately, I don't want to make it all about compensation, but that's another kind of...
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, something that I've always felt is that, unfortunately, there is this impression of that you're worth more because you've done something for a longer period of time. And going back to what we were talking about before around like the inconsistencies and equality and everything, I think there's a huge problem with that, because if you look at other industries, that 10 times multiplier does not exist. If you're a mechanic, there's a good possibility that you're earning not far off of what you were earning 10 years ago, and you still do 20 MOTs a week. So how we've managed to get away with it, I'm not entirely sure. But I also think that it creates an additional problem around the expectations when you start looking at businesses at scale, and how it relates to the fact of, if I keep having these principal people, these £60,000 a year people, I can only have so many of them before I go bankrupt. So my only way of being able to scale is to continue hiring people who are in lower level areas, so junior designers. And then there is a complete ignorance about the reality that is a child-parent relationship, and you have to nurture that. So then you have to have those people in that management position to be able to help nurture and develop them. And I think that a lot of businesses forget that, and that they weigh it, disproportionately as a result.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's to go back to your earlier point, technology is the big enabler of that, of not only the speed of trajectory through a career. So, for example, the iPhone is only 11 years old. 12 years old maybe now. But only for the last 12 years has anyone been designing for mobile, really. In kind of, or the smartphone, if you like, touch screens and the paradigm that we now understand as mobile. So that's a great leveler, really, and it allows people who haven't necessarily kind of gone through the years to be able to accelerate themselves through careers, either by learning things, just being able to learn faster than the people who were incumbent, which is, a classic startup mentality anyway. We go in and disrupt the incumbents, and that's really effectively what's happening on a micro scale. But also it allows you to pick winners. So within the world of technology, some companies will win and some will lose. And if you're lucky enough to have picked a Facebook when you were, when they were 50 employees in and then stuck around for a few years, then you're a winner. And to an extent, sure, that's like your ability to spot a good thing, but also right place, right time. And everyone wants a bit of that. And everyone wants to be able to make those kind of big jumps across ladders in order to get to the point that they see seemingly their peers, who are the same age as them and with the same kind of background and experience, are suddenly ahead of design or whatever the thing is. So it becomes attainable. And then as soon as it's attainable, then people will play that game. So yeah, you do end up with title inflation. Title inflation is rampant. And I say that as someone who has undoubtedly been a beneficiary of it. So it's kind of in some ways an uncomfortable thing for me to say, but I think I can now say that because I'm kind of not a designer anymore in some ways. But
well, you've just hit the peak level of every meal is beans on toast for you at the moment, isn't it?
I am. Yeah, I'm not even beans on toast profitable at the moment, so we'll get there. But I think that you're exactly right. If you look at law or medicine, there's all of these checks and balances in place, and you need to go through the ropes and kind of walk the walk, and there's a very clear career path for you. But this is the Wild West. Moore's law has allowed companies to grow faster now. You can get from zero to IPO in like 3 years now, and that's completely unheard of. And that's all powered by the power of the internet, and it's allowed everyone to get involved and start digging for gold. So yeah, it's interesting because that's an exciting thing, and provides a huge amount of opportunity, but also allows for this kind of unfair or uneven distribution of advantage and of definitely the north-south divide is a good example in the UK. London has traditionally has put itself in a position to be a hub for the creative arts and for tech and all these other kind of industries, which then introduces competition. Lots of people move to London to work in tech, which means the salaries go up and all of that stuff starts to happen. I'm quite excited about the rise of remote and distributed work, because I think that is one of the things that will even out this kind of unfair advantage that definitely London has in the UK. I mean, it's crazy, really.
I think it can. Whether it will, or actually, it's more for me. I have an ethics problem with remote working, which is that when you have a office, the company takes on the operational cost of the business, and good remote companies, and there are good remote companies, acknowledge that they are distributing that cost out to their employees. But the vast majority of them are basically taking the piss. You're paying for your electricity and heating, the wear and tear on your carpets and all of the rest of it. And you will always see in an advert for a role that, you get a laptop budget, you can buy a microphone and some headphones and stuff like that. And it's like, well, yeah, you should be buying me that. But at the same time, you should also be paying for my gas and electric and my internet connection and my telephone bill, because these are business costs, and then suddenly individuals are taking them on. And I think that there is a big risk moving forward that is just going to kind of get swept under the carpet. If you imagine a large enterprise that didn't start remote, so isn't 1Password or GitHub or something like that, where from day one it's all been about you get a proportionate of your bills because we're leveraging you. You take a big pre-existing business and they go, okay, we're going to introduce a remote working policy. No way that you're going to get any of that back, and it's just pure profit margin for them. So I think that there's a lot of area that needs to be addressed and worked out over time.
I think you're right. I think that the power of, especially at the moment, and this may not always be the case, but we're in such an employee marketplace, and companies are desperate to hire, that I think actually the power of the market can in some ways counteract that. So you'll get found out if you're not providing those benefits. But yeah, I agree. I mean, we're still in the kind of nascent stage of all of this, and undoubtedly there's a place for whether it's regulation or something set by law around the things that you're expected to have as a workplace benefit if you work from home, for example, is a really interesting thing to think about. But you also don't want to, if you believe that fundamentally it's a good thing for people to be able to work from anywhere, then you also don't want to squash that surge. You want it to kind of find its momentum and then work out what's breaking around it and fix that. And also allow the good companies to win if they're doing the right thing.
Let's hope so. So what's the future hold for you? What does the next 6 months look like?
Next 6 months. Well, I've now got to the point that the last 6 months was very much building the product and working out, not just building it, but kind of working out what it should be. And actually, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I turned the corner into now work out where I've got it wrong, iterate on it, get enough customers through the door that I can start paying my hosting bills and all that kind of stuff. I've got a co-founder who is joining soon, so that's really exciting. And I've been writing a lot of the code myself so far, but I'm excited to give that responsibility to someone who actually knows what they're doing. So he's joining as a technical co-founder. Really excited about that. And then that will allow me to go out and, pound pavements and go and talk to customers and really double down on making sure that progression is adding value. And also that it can be a viable business. Also very important. But what I'm loving, quite honestly, is I'm getting to have conversations with design leaders and leaders in tech and in industry generally, who I've always admired, and who are really the very best at what they do. And I can have a conversation with them about what their problems are, and it's just a fascinating process for me. As a designer at heart, I still, the thrill of the chase and trying to find what one of the first real tools for this problem ever actually looks like. The tools for managers at the moment look a lot like HR tools, and it's all kind of a bit depressing. So I'm really excited to work out what the equivalent of Sketch for a manager is, like something that superpowers you, that makes you feel like you're doing a good job every day, and makes your life a lot easier.
Sounds like a very exciting time ahead. Johnny, thank you so much for taking part today. It's been really great speaking to you. If people wanted to know more, where can they go?
progressionapp.com is the app. I also run my own podcast, Progression Podcast. I think you should be able to just search it wherever you look for podcasts, but it's also at anchor.co something. Put it in the show notes / progression-pod. So you can find that as well, and also on Twitter at Progression App.
thank you once again for listening to this episode of The UX Coach. If you are new here, you can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere else you get your feeds from. You can also sign up to our monthly newsletter featuring the best posts from around the world on digital careers and practices at theuxcoach.com. I'll be back in a few weeks with another guest to talk about their experiences of navigating digital design and the new opportunities ahead. Until then, come and talk to us on Twitter at the UX Coach Pod. Check out the website, theuxcoach.com.